The Seventh Tower by Garth Nix. Book 4, Above the Veil. Chapter 3.
"Douse your light,"
Mila said suddenly. She stared at her sunstone ring. When the light did not fade fast enough, she covered it with her other hand. Tal, who was properly trained, made his wink out in a second.
"Why?"
Tal whispered as they stood in the darkness. For some reason, the whole cavern seemed much quieter without light, and he didn't want to disturb that silence. Mila's only answer was a slight splashing sound. She was moving around.
"I don't like this,"
said Adris.
"I feel weak."
"I feel sick,"
said Audris.
"like being thirsty back on Ymir." "It's only for a moment,"
Mila told them. Her voice startled Tal, coming from behind him and farther out than he expected.
I have it now."
Light flared on her hand again. Tal let his sunstone surge in answer.
"Have what?"
he asked.
"There is light over there,"
said Mila, pointing.
"and I heard something too, but it is distant. This cavern, this fish pond, is very large."
"It could be the biggest one," said Tal. "There are 3, I think." Vague and unpleasant memories of childhood tales were coming back to him. Something about the big fish pond and enormous eels, each 10 stretches long and with an appetite to match. He remembered laughing as a child at the thought of underfolk being surprised by a giant eel. It didn't seem so funny now that he was wading in the fish pond. Something brushed his waist, and Tal yelped and leapt back. In that same second, he recognized what it was. A weed. A thick black rope of seaweed, with huge, bulbous air nodes that kept it floating on the surface. Mila lifted up a strand.
"This is different from the seaweeds we harvest under the ice. I don't think this can be eaten."
"Definitely not," said Tal, grimacing in distaste. He pushed the weed away. It was slimy, it smelled bad, and there was a lot more of it to wade through. As Tal moved the weed away, he saw a face in the water. He almost flinched as he saw it, thinking someone else was creeping up behind him, before he realized who it was. It was his own reflection, but so different from the last time he'd looked in a proper mirror that he almost didn't recognize himself. That had been only a few weeks before, but so much had happened. The young chosen boy with the slightly scraggly dark brown hair and lopsided smile was gone. In his place, there was someone Tal would have once described as a wild man. His hair was crazier and dirtier, and there was a broad stripe down the middle that was bright green, the result of an encounter with a monster in Ymir. His face appeared to be permanently set in a tense expression that was half scowl and half frown. He looked quite a lot older than his almost 14 years. "Come on," said Mila. Tal realized he'd been staring at his reflection. He looked across at Mila and noticed that she had changed too. She had discarded her temporary disguise of a chosen matron's yellow robe and openly wore her ice-carl furs and Selski hide armor. She still had her white blonde hair tied back, but something had changed. It took him a moment to realize the change was in her gray eyes. The fierceness had gone out of them, as if some spark had been lost. Only then did Tal understand that she really was going to give herself to the ice. When he thought he was saving her life, and his own, by agreeing to take the 2 storm shepherds as spirit shadows, he had only postponed Mila's fate. She would take her own life, because she had lost her own shadow, and gained a spirit shadow instead. "Come on," Mila repeated. She started wading off through the water, pausing every now and then to push apart particularly difficult strands of the bulbous seaweed. Tal followed more slowly. He felt incredibly tired all of a sudden. Everything felt like it was too hard. No matter what he did, he made things worse. Now he knew he had to make sure Mila survived. The only way he could think of doing that was to stop her leaving the castle, which would be totally against her wishes, and going against Mila's wishes was almost never a good idea. Perhaps Ebbet would be able to figure something out, Tal thought wearily. Ebbet. They had to find Ebbet, wherever he was, before the guards caught up with them. Or caught up with Ebbet, Tal suddenly thought. That hadn't occurred to him before. He groaned. Mila, Adris, and Audris all stopped and looked at him. "What is it?" Mila asked. She already had her bone knife in her hand, drawn in an instant. Tal shook his head. "Nothing. I just realized how stupid this is. We're looking for Ebbet, but we don't know where he is, or what we can do once we find him. There are guards everywhere, not to mention Sushin, whatever in Light's name he actually is. We're in a scum-filled fish pond. I haven't done anything right, and I don't understand what's going on." His voice trailed off as Mila stared at him. It was not the Icecrawl way to complain, he knew. It was the Chosen way, though. Chosen complained about underfolk servants, about food quality, about their clothes, about anything. Anything trivial, Tal thought. Did he really want to be like that? He looked down at his reflection again and tried to force a smile. It came slowly, and for some reason it no longer had that annoying crooked curve on the left side. "On the other hand," he said slowly, "I have a new sunstone, which is all I wanted to start with. And a spirit shadow."
That's me,
said Adris proudly. "And we have the codex hidden up in the mausoleum," Tal continued. Saying the positive things made him feel a bit better about the whole situation. "So what am I complaining about?" "I don't know," said Mila. She frowned and added, "You are alive. Be grateful for the gift of life till you have it no more." She turned and plowed off through the weed again, faster than before. Tal followed, wincing at the pain in his leg. She was going faster than was comfortable for him, but he didn't complain. It was hard going, wading through the seaweed. There was a lot more of it than Tal would have thought was healthy for a working fish pond. For that matter, there didn't seem to be any fish, or eels, though it was possible they had scared the fish away, or couldn't see them in the dark. Mila had insisted that they keep their sunstones down to dim sparks, so they didn't give themselves away. Adris and Audris had complained at first, but seemed to have gotten used to feeling weak from the lack of light. Tal waited for at least 15 minutes without a single thought, and without being aware of what he was doing. He just pushed through the seaweed, following Mila. He would have mindlessly kept on doing it too, except she stopped. "What is it?" he whispered, edging around her. "Look," Mila whispered back. Tal looked. There was some light ahead, but it wasn't the clear, steady illumination of sunstones. The light was flickering and fairly weak, changing color quite a bit. A couple of oil lamps, Tal thought, the ones the underfolk used in the parts of the castle where there were no fixed sunstones. Underfolk couldn't use sunstones, of course, so they had to make do with oil lanterns and similar devices. In the dim light, Tal could see 5 people hard at work. 2 were in the water, passing loads of something up, while the others were taking whatever it was and putting it in barrels. "Underfolk harvesting fish," Tal said, not bothering to keep his voice down. "We can just walk past." A cold hand across his mouth cut him off. "Quiet!" Mila whispered fiercely. "They're not normal underfolk, and they're not harvesting fish." For a moment, Tal was tempted to bite her hand, but the moment passed, and Mila took her hand away. Besides, as he squinted at the dock, he realized there was something funny about these underfolk. They weren't wearing regular white robes, for a start, and they weren't harvesting fish. It was the seaweed they were dragging up, cutting it into lengths on the dock before putting it in the barrels. "They have spears," said Mila quietly. Her eyesight was much better than Tal's, particularly in the dark or near dark. "And one of them has a long knife. Ah!" One of them had stopped exactly where the lantern light fell most brightly. He was a boy, not much older than Tal, but taller and more muscular. He wore underfolk whites, but something had been painted or embroidered on the cloth, some sort of pattern or writing that Tal couldn't make out from the distance. He also wore a strange triangular hat with the sharpest peak at the front. It had several long black or deep blue feathers stuck to it at a jaunty angle. He looked vaguely familiar. Tal felt sure he'd seen him somewhere before, but he couldn't work out where. Mila could, though. "It's the one called Crow," she said.
The leader of the people who brought us up from the heatways when the air went bad.
Them? Asked Tal. He'd been partially unconscious or delirious from the fumes in the heatway tunnels. If they hadn't been rescued, they would have died down there. He hadn't had time to think about the people who'd carried them out. Now it was all coming back.
Yes,
said Mila.
we had better be careful. Most of them wanted to kill us, and they hate the Chosen.
What? Asked Tal. They're underfolk. They can't hate the Chosen. It's not allowed.
They are not normal underfolk. It is like I said before. They are outcasts.
Tal stared at the underfolk. It was true they were wearing very odd clothes, and no underfolk had any business to be in the heatway tunnels where they'd rescued Tal and Mila. He had heard that some underfolk rebelled against the Chosen and lived below the normal levels, but he'd never really believed it. There are only 5 of them, he said finally. We both have sunstones, and Adris and Audris.
But we're weak,
said Audris, a plaintive voice in the darkness.
I couldn't crush a cave roach the way I feel at the moment.
I could.
Adris chimed in.
I could easily crush a cave roach, and maybe something about as big as a dotted or, say, a lowwalk.
I was exaggerating,
interrupted Audris.
Of course I could crush a cave roach, but I wouldn't be much use in a proper fight.
I would be,
Adris said proudly.
But if there was more light...
Quiet, both of you,
Mila ordered.
We have to get past them,
said Tal.
There's no other way out of this lake, and the guards will probably find that trapdoor soon.
We owe them life, said Mila, the words coming out slowly, as if she were thinking aloud.
That means we must talk to them first. They may know where to find your greatest Uncle Ebbet.
Great uncle, not greatest, Tal corrected. I doubt it, though. Underfolk don't normally know anything except their jobs. I wonder what they're planning to do with that weed.
Adris, Audris, be prepared to defend us if they attack,
said Mila.
We'll give you more light. Let's go.